Okay.
All right, looks like we're ready to go. Okay, so it's 12:08 and we're going to get started. As we don't have a quorum, we will hold off on approval of minutes from the November meeting until January. So first item is the chairman's report. In November, we spent $1,895.34. That was for personnel and equipment. And year to date, we have spent $10,327.05. And that is all for the chairman's report. We will move on to old business. The update on our fiscal 22 priorities. First is youth and parents. We talked about before the parent equity workshop. They were doing a two-part series. We are still waiting to hear about the second part of that series. And then for those that were here for the site visit on Monday, one of the things that we discussed there was youth involvement as part of our board. And Julia talked about there that we do have some funding available to try to incentivize to get youth. Right now we have gift cards, right, Julia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And there is someone on the youth advisory board that is from Kane County, which as I think almost everybody was on there Monday, but that they're going to get that person, make an introduction with Julia. And so maybe we may have an inroad there. So more information to follow on that. But we also just wanted to kind of, Julia's going to give an sort of an overview of what the youth do for the youth advisory board, just to give an idea of how we could use a youth member for our board as well.
So I just wanted to kind of explain the process that the statewide committee has taken. So they formed a work group essentially, and we're able to recruit youth. And so the youth that were recruited kind of make up this cohort, and they're from across the state, different backgrounds and connections to the juvenile justice system or criminal justice system. And so with that cohort, then they have partnered with the commission, partnered with, I believe it's Adler University. It's one of the programs that they have. And so they have a person who is responsible for convening this cohort of youth. And the person that they are utilizing comes from a restorative justice background. So he is using more of that framework to bring together the youth in sort of that circle format, and really just have these conversations and dialogues about various topics related to the juvenile justice system, the issues that are out there. And so the idea with kind of those sessions is to prepare them then to become official members of the youth advisory board. And then and they did have their graduation back in the fall. And so now that they're members and they've completed that cohort, they are now joining the work groups of the Illinois Juvenile Justice Commission. So those of you that were at the site visit, you heard about Randy. She has said that she wants to be involved in the Racial Justice and Equity Committee. And so they've kind of chosen which work group that they want to be a part of. So that's how they become then integrated into the commission itself. So I just wanted to kind of explain that there's like this method to getting them involved, or this onboarding process, I guess, to help prepare them so that they're not just throwing them in and saying, hey, join this, work group or committee of stakeholders and professionals, and expect them to feel equipped. So it is kind of giving them that supportive route so that they feel more equipped to join in the conversation.
Any questions about that? Okay, then we are moving on to law enforcement. So our juvenile jeopardy, Julia is still looking for officers for facilitators. Eric, we were kind of wondering with JOA getting back together, if you would be willing to maybe take it to JOA and see if there's any anybody who would be interested in being a facilitator from there too, or maybe for them to push it out to their other officers as well?
Yeah, actually, we're meeting tomorrow here at St. Charles, so I will spread the word.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. And Julia can probably get you some additional information if you, so you have that available for you too. Right. Excellent, thank you. So then no new updates on restorative practices. Our expungement packet. So there were not any statutorial changes to the packet. Julia and I had a meeting with Judge Parga. She had some concerns about, and I do get this, about it being overwhelming for a juvenile to read it. Julia had a thought, and so maybe get some ideas. We don't have anybody from court services on here though. Possibly maybe having some kids from the youth home read it and see if they can explain what it says, if it's readable for them, just to get an idea of how much maybe we need to change it, or if we need to change it at all. Maybe they read it and they get it. So we're going to look into doing that, but if anybody has some recommendations or ideas about that, just let us know. Okay.
Rochelle, can I add, expand on that a little bit too? I don't know how it would necessarily work with the youth that are in detention, and maybe we could talk about incentivizing them using their the token system that they work off of, but we do have those gift cards that we talk about for the youth engagement. So if we are talking about youth that are not currently detained, maybe there's thought too to incentivize them using some of those gift cards as well for their feedback.
Also too, I know online they have some readability checkers, so it can give like a certain grade level of being able to understand that. I wonder if there's certain sections that you can go through that just to copy and paste it, because most of our contacts with families, research is telling us to put it at like a 5th or 6th grade level, so that way you're hitting all kind of potential parental groups with their ability level. So I'm just wondering if that's something you can do where with that readability checker, if it's coming out at like a higher than a high school level, if some rewording needs to be done.
So that's really cool. I've never heard about that. So maybe we can start there. Unfortunately, the frustrating part is there are legal terms that have to be used in there. So I think that we are and we try to explain them. There is a definition section. So we try to get it down to a youth level at that part, but you have to put them in different parts of it. So I don't know, the readability checkers we might automatically get kicked out for that.
And if you want, send it to me. I have no problem just taking a look at it, because I know some of the legal definitions, you have to keep it there, but I in it enough where I can definitely tell you if it's too over the heads of some of the youth we're working with or not. So
thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, so we can move on to fiscal year 23 priorities. Our first is the JJC restructure. As you all know, we have convened a work group to look at possibly restructuring our council. And we did talk about this a little bit at the meeting on Monday at our site visit. Unfortunately, this is a busy time for everyone. So we've been having some difficulty convening the group with schedules, but we are still working on that. Just to give everyone else who is not a part of that group an idea of what we are going to be talking about at our next meeting, because that may also, some of you may want to join for that meeting as well. We are going to be looking at the purpose of the JJC and how it is useful to those that are involved, especially with their job functions, and trying to figure out, are we fulfilling a specific purpose that is worth maintaining for this county, or has it just become another meeting that people have to attend? So kind of not only restructure of the council, but possibly a whole overhaul, and asking some really important questions of all of us of what we are doing and where we are going with the council, and just making sure that we are hitting the marks that we want to hit. And if we are not, are we able to hit them, or have we sort of come to the end of our abilities? So we're going to have hopefully it's going to be a really good conversation, and answer maybe some tough questions at that time, but just to let everyone know that's kind of where we are and what we're working on. We just are right now trying to work around schedules to do that. So if anybody has any questions on that, we'd be happy to try to answer them now, but also, you can reach out to Julia at any time too, if you think of things later in regards to that. Okay. And so then the next thing is our symposium planning, and I'm going to turn this over to Julia.
So based on the conversations that we were able to have in our work groups, I started just kind of searching for speakers, and my method behind this was going back to speakers that, looking at previous conferences that I know that we're familiar with, letting them kind of do the work of finding speakers and kind of building off of that, but also looking back at some of the experts that we've worked with before as well. So I don't have, I didn't send this out formally because it's not we're still teasing out a lot of the details, so I didn't feel like it was extremely beneficial, but I did just want to bring it to the board's attention, kind of who I'm talking to, and about being speakers for the symposium, and like the topics that they would be covering. So as we shared, I think last month, the idea being that we're going to move towards more of this speaker series instead of a symposium. So it would be offered on a monthly basis next spring, probably for like an hour to an hour and a half session, where it would be opened up to anyone who's working with youth in Kane County, especially those who are at risk of juvenile justice system involvement. We'd, of course, look for continuing education credits for the various disciplines that might be attending. All the dates, times, costs are currently to be determined. But I can tell you that our Zoom account for the council holds up to 100 participants that can join at one time. So if we feel like that's sufficient, then that hopefully will make it a little bit easier to plan a virtual speaker series. But if people have concerns with that, of course, we need to discuss that and find an alternative plan then to hold more than 100 participants. As far as speakers go, so some of you were around when we did the multi-system collaboration training and technical assistance program through the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform at Georgetown University. So one of the, she's now the senior deputy director. I don't remember if that was her title at the time, but one of the staff members for the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform is Macon Stewart. And so I've reached out to her to potentially do a presentation that covers the utilization of data and then using that to inform decision making. I am meeting with her next week to kind of go over this topic and just see what she can offer, but she's done presentations for the Coalition for Juvenile Justice. For those who aren't familiar with the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform, they have done a lot of work with this crossover youth model. So really looking at youth that are dually involved sort of thing. And again, they have that expertise that they provided to us through that multi-system collaboration training and technical assistance grant. The next speaker that I've talked to, and I shared a little bit about this at the site visit, her name is Stephanie Shaw. She's from the Council of State Governments, and she's a program manager for their juvenile justice program. So she was a presenter at APPA, and I give full credit to LaTanya for bringing her kind of discussion to my attention, or to the group's attention at the time, because as I looked into it a little bit further, they had a presentation at APPA this year on really looking at the probation conditions and how they can be more individualized potentially reducing the amount of probation conditions. So just sharing some of the research behind that thought process or that strategy, so to speak. And so I have met with her and we've talked about more of a broader scope, but thinking about how, just overall interventions can be tailored to meet the needs of young people who are at risk of system involvement or even involved in the system. So again, trying to cover the scope of the juvenile justice system, the decision points, and really considering how this aligns across the systems that youth are involved with. So we don't want to make it just specific to the juvenile justice system because we know that there are earlier entry points that end up putting them on this trajectory, right? So trying to really take more of that broader approach with the conversation. So it's not so focused on just like the probation conditions and kind of that same presentation, but still within that spirit. The last presenter that I spoke with, her name is Mariah Johnson, and she is basically a private diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. She did a presentation for the Illinois Collaboration on Youth last summer that I attended, and it was a session that was on racial bias, but she utilized an approach that encouraged those that were participating to really just self-reflect on their own perspectives, but then took it more and looked at like the current structures, the procedures that are in place, and how our perspectives may interact with those, and then ultimately contribute to the disparities that we see in the system. And so I met with her earlier this week. So the proposed presentation would take sort of a similar approach, but tie in some specific juvenile justice system aspects. So she did ask, if she's going to do this presentation, she'd like a little bit of context as to some of the conversations that we have. So I'm specifically thinking about like our data presentation that we did with CPRD, if we could share, those slides with her, or perhaps share, our racial and ethnic disparities plan, just to give her a little bit of context as to what we've considered as a council. Her presentation, though, she did recommend that we consider a two-part discussion, so 2-hour sessions, so that there's time to kind of have the conversation and let it marinate and then come back to it, sometime later. So kind of my thought is doing them in that order, just based around the topics, because, you start with kind of thinking about like data as a whole, and then go into, one specific area where data could inform a change or a systemic change, and thinking about some of those interventions that are put into place. The other piece to thinking about, those interventions is how those contribute to the disparities. And when you look at, specifically probation conditions is what that presentation looked at, and how it contributes to some of the disparity issues that we see in the system. Then that seems like it would be a nice way to segue into later in the spring, talking about sort of that systemic racial equity conversation. So in a nutshell, that is the preliminary plan for the speaker series. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or immediate reactions or thoughts.
So Julia, we would have 3 speakers, but our last speaker would be 2 different sessions, and that would make the 4 sessions.
Yep.
So part of why we wanted to discuss this today too is that, Julia is having meetings with these speakers and talking to them, but we also didn't know if how the board itself, if we wanted to do anything further to vet these speakers specifically. I'm certainly open to helping Julia, research and make sure that they're on the board and everything. And I know Julia has done that a little bit too, but if there was anything else that the board wanted for us to do in selecting the speakers.
So when you say you've sort of started to vet them, what does that mean?
I mean, like I had said, I had gone based on ones that I've seen do presentations before, so I have a little bit of context, or we've had like a relationship with, or somebody else has. So because Latanya had had talked about that presentation she saw at APPA. I feel like that baseline familiarity is at least a good starting point. I can certainly get like CVs and that sort of thing and send those out to the board if that would increase confidence levels. But that's kind of what I'm referring to.
I guess if it's been older presentations that they've made at these different places, I think I'd be a little more wanting to see what's going on recently with them, some CVs or what they've been involved in recently. But if otherwise, that's probably enough, unless somebody else has a different opinion.
And
I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, I can say that our involvement with Macon Stewart was back in 2016, but she did a presentation for the Coalition for Juvenile Justice back in 2019, I believe was the year, so at their conference. So, and I would, some of them are also updating their presentation. So like when I talk with Mariah, she has, the presentation that she developed for in the summer, this past summer of 2022, but she said, depending on where we want to focus, she would modify it or, do a completely new presentation. The APPA was in August. So they're still pretty recent, but if that, for whatever that's worth, to your point, Judge.
Thank you.
So I think, Julie, we could probably get CVs, right? And send those out to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think then the other thing that Julia was looking for today was some ideas as to dates. Yes, Julia?
Well, I think, I think the lunch hour has been established as like the time that is going to be the most available for the most people. So I'm imagining it would be over a lunch hour time, but I don't know if there's certain days of the week where it's better to stay away from that time. Of course, it's going to matter based on the speaker's schedules as well, but just to give me a baseline idea.
So especially if you're talking about setting something sooner rather than later, lunch hours would be the only time that would, like, for example, work for me. But I know it's not all about me. This would be open to a lot more people. But if you set it, if it were something they were talking about setting out further, then people might be able to arrange their schedule around it to have time later in the day or earlier in the day to participate. So I think it kind of just matters on how quickly, at least in my opinion, we're trying to get it scheduled.
Right, I agree with that as well, because if you give us enough notice, we can make sure our court call is not, at 3 o'clock, or 3 o'clock probably is the best. You never know when we have detention, so we stay away from the 1:30 issue. But I agree with Judge that, if it's a short notice, it would be lunch. Otherwise, it's nice to do it at like 3:30 at the end of the day.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's helpful.
All right. Julie, was there anything that we missed that you needed on that?
Nope.
Okay.
I can, once I get a little bit more clarification around what the presentations will look at, I can put together more of a formal proposal. I do have a question. I lied, sorry. Is there any, is the board okay with sharing like the data presentation that like the PowerPoint that we got from CPRD and or our racial and ethnic disparities plan with the speaker, Mariah, who would be doing the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation or the racial equity conversation? And if we need an official vote, I can do that via email. I don't know if.
I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I think she would want an idea of kind of what's happening in our area, and I think that could represent that.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, I think maybe we should do an email vote on it because court service is not on here.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that because obviously we have to watch out for what data was collected, how it was collected, and the confidentiality of any of that going outside of certain places if it hasn't already been addressed. So I think an email vote would be appropriate.
That's good.
Thank you.
Okay, then we can move on to racial and ethnic disparities. Our RED team did meet at the end of November. They discussed some of the current offenses happening in schools and began reviewing the results of the law enforcement survey. This led to a discussion about considering the effectiveness of interventions with those that may not complete their station adjustments, or may we reoffend while there are efforts already in place to divert them. And so they are looking for a time to reconvene in the new year and to lay out their next steps or focus. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the IRJEC statewide committee. Julie, do you want to talk about this one because you're on that committee?
Sure. So they are, as I've shared before, they're moving to it's a bi-monthly meeting schedule, I believe. So it's every other month. So the next meeting is not until January. They skip November and December just with the holidays because they meet on the 4th Wednesday of the month. So that is generally around when holidays hit. But with that said, there is a work group that has come together. So it's their training and technical assistance work group to start outlining the training and technical assistance process. And as I share, the jurisdictions that they're looking to specifically work with are Lake and Madison County in the new year, work with them on their racial and ethnic disparities work. Both of those counties have councils, and the way that they were selected, just as a refresher, was based upon criteria that the committee had agreed upon. And so part of that had to do with them having councils, the geographic locations, as well as the number of decision points where they had higher disparity. There is a second work group for the statewide committee that's focused on improving data collection, and the plan is for them to come together in the new year, but there's potential for some little bit of homework to help assist with that preparation for that work group. So that's where the statewide committee's at.
Any questions on that? Okay, the adolescent domestic battery work group is meeting January 10th. And then our final thing, an old business, is the JJC site visit that happened on Monday. Thank you for everyone that was able to attend. I know that schedules are really crazy this time of year, so it was nice that we had a good turnout. And thank you to Julia for representing us so well there. Julia always does a lot of the talking for us, and she does a fantastic job at it. So I just wanted to give a shout out to her. We really appreciate you, Julia. Thank you very much. But for that specific topic, and for those that were there, any thoughts or reflections from anybody that attended? Okay, everybody's good. All right.
Can I ask, Rochelle? Sorry.
Yeah.
I know there are a couple who weren't able to attend. Those who weren't able to attend, do you have any questions about the site visit or?
I wasn't able to attend. I'll have Ms. Cowart give me a debrief when we have time sometime, because I think she was there.
It was, yes.
Yes.
And I would second that request, Judge, from Ms. Cowart.
I mean, if we want to get something quick right now, we can do it, but I don't want to take everyone's time just because I couldn't attend in a timely fashion, so I can get an update. Thank you.
I trust Lark can give you a good overview of what went down, so I'll leave it to her.
Thanks.
All right, so then we're moving on to new business. And Julia is going to do a quick fiscal year 2023 plan review.
Yes, so if anybody is paying attention to the clock, we're about halfway through our fiscal year. So I thought we did this last year. And so I thought maybe it might be timely to go ahead and take a look at our plan that we put into our grant application last May. So if I can pull, it wasn't giving me the screen options. I had to get to it. Okay. Everybody can see the screen. Okay. So we kind of laid it out based upon decision point, which ironically we were asked then at the site visit. We were able to speak to sort of where our focus was with the 5 decision points, which ones we're kind of honing in on. And so we spoke about the arrest decision point. And so as far as our goal goes, it was to establish that mechanism for collecting and analyzing juvenile arrest data on a regular basis, which it hasn't been overtly discussed up until this point, and it's been kind of, you know, passed on to our racial and ethnic disparities committee to toss that conversation around, and then I think it extends even beyond that. It's not an easy conversation to have, and it was certainly lifted up and acknowledged at the site visit with the just for consideration on a statewide level how difficult this is. So I don't know if anybody has any comments, points, reflections about this goal. I won't belabor this and read everything. Everybody has access to this. Our second one was around the detention decision point. And so as we know, we've been trying to tackle the issue of adolescent domestic battery, which again was acknowledged in our site visit earlier this week, that it continues to be the higher offense for why kids are coming into detention. Even though they're released pretty quickly, it's an entry point into detention. So that, as this board is aware, we've been working to reconvene that work group, and they will reconvene in the new year. So hopefully we can get some momentum going on around this issue. Any comments about the progress or anything to that nature with this one?
So my only comment would be the Illinois Supreme Court has convened a Supreme Court Committee on Domestic Violence. I don't think there are any judges from our circuit that are on that. I just got the email today. But certainly it would be something that might be able to be discussed, you know, in that committee, and the issues that surround that, and see if anybody can start to have ideas. I'll follow up if there's anyone from our circuit that's on that once I get a chance to look at it in a little more detail.
Judge,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed. Did you say that they are the committee for adolescent domestic battery, or just domestic battery in general?
It just says domestic battery in general. The committee, I'm reading from it right now, is tasked with reviewing and making recommendations on matter affecting domestic violence, human trafficking, and the court system. I don't know why this an adolescent discussion could not be, you know, brought up with the committee. They want to look at and analyze the impact of legislation and case law on it. So I think it might be something that, you know, we could have somebody at least discuss if it was something that we wanted to pursue with that committee.
No, I think that's great. I appreciate you bringing that up, because especially if they're going to look at that, I think so we had historically looked at this 3-prong approach, right? And so if we're looking at some proposed statutory changes, that's going to certainly have an impact with that committee as well, if they're looking at ones for the adult system.
Absolutely. So, you know, again, I haven't gotten through everybody. A quick glance, I don't see anyone from the 16th Circuit, but DuPage has Judge Walsh on it. So, you know, we could reach out to her if we wanted to, you know, have her kind of be involved with some of the discussion in relation to juveniles.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. The next topic that goal, or area of focus was addressing the mental health needs. And so we were thinking that this would be done through the mental health work group, but that has since disbanded. So I'm imagining that perhaps this one needs to be removed from our plan at this point, unless others have thoughts. keep rolling. The next one is around cross-system collaboration. So this really focuses on, I think this really gets to that restructure conversation, right? Like it wasn't framed as a restructure, but really it's talking about like strengthening our relationships with those that we're working with. And so I think, as Rochelle shared with our updates of that work group and where that's at, I feel like, we're still trying to sort that out. It's a conversation that is maybe we anticipated being easier than it is. And so I think it'll be a good discussion in the new year to keep tackling. And then our final one is around racial and ethnic disparities. So I think looking at how we can reduce the racial and ethnic disparities by utilizing various sources of data. So that has been kind of the responsibility of and purpose of the racial and ethnic disparities team, which I feel like up until this point in this fiscal year, we've tried to gather more data to help supplement some of the decision point data that we see. And so I think at this point, we may need to then now start to like pinpoint where we want to direct our efforts in the interest of reducing racial and ethnic disparities at some level. So those were our 5 goal areas or goals that we had for this fiscal year. That's the entirety of the plan. Does anybody have any additional comments, feedback, progress to note that you've seen, anything like that? Okay. I will stop my share and I'll pass it back to Rochelle.
Okay. Any other updates that anyone has or anything that they needed to talk about?
Can I just give you a quick update? I did the expungement packet really quickly while the meeting was going on. We're at a college senior level readability. So just wanted to, yeah. So.
All right, we got some work to do.
Now, okay, so you said that there's a way to put it in. Is there a system now that we can put it in that it'll tell us what we should change or like give us like alternative ways to phrase things?
I guess the bad news is all of the legal terms were the ones that were flagged. And so I think just going through it is what it is. So, I mean, there's only so much you can truly water it down.
So it does flag though the term. Sorry, Rochelle. It flags the return or the terms.
It does, and any 3-syllable words are considered like a higher level order thinking word, and so that just flagged it to that higher level.
Is there and there might be already any kind of definitions of those words, like already included? There is some of that, yeah.
There is, and that's what I was wondering, like maybe we go back and take another look at our definitions and make sure that our no flags in the substance of our definitions, because maybe we're meeting while we have to keep those legal terms, maybe we're doing okay defining them.
Yeah, and I'm wondering even I don't know. It's tough. Any of those forms, you almost need somebody that has that legal sense just walking you through there, because I might even give it to a colleague and have them try and complete it.
Yeah, and I mean, even the flow charts, I mean, like the whole process of it is complicated, and yeah, you're asking for people who don't really have contact with the system to figure it out. But okay, we'll continue to work on it. Thanks for doing that, Josh.
No problem.
Okay, anything else? All right, our next meeting will be a quarterly meeting. So that will be January 12th at 11:30. And then our next Board of Directors meeting is February 9th at 12 p.m. Do I have to have a motion to adjourn since we didn't have a quorum?
You know what? We got a quorum at 12.
Oh yeah,
I
that's right.
forgot to bring it to your attention. So I don't know if you want to approve the minutes.
Yeah, actually, real quick, I'm gonna, then since we have a quorum, I'm gonna go back, sorry, just one quick thing. The approval of meetings, Julia sent those out. Does anyone have any additions, deletions? Okay, then we will approve those as submitted. And then if I could have a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, then it is 12:48 and we are finished. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
You're well.
Bye-bye.